Birds, indeed. Sweet Magnolias don't toast with bread.
And welcome to Module 3. This week, or the next couple of weeks, we are going to spend some time working through how do we actually locate the literature, and we'll spend a little bit more time really working through all parts of a research report. And for this week, the next 2 weeks, we will spend some time again understanding and implementing the process to locate the literature. You will have plenty of opportunities to practice. I will show you a couple of things and encourage that you pause and then try it on your own. And then part of the activities for the next couple of weeks are also you trying it and talking about your experience with your group. And then the second thing is that you're going to spend some time really deciphering and understanding all parts of the research study and what it is that you're actually reading as you are getting those research reports back. And then through your practice, you will spend some time finding and analyzing research that aligns to your pop topic. At this point, all of you have pop topics, so you have a content area that you'll be able to utilize for your practice. These next couple of weeks are just that, practice. Try out all of the different search functions, the different search databases. You will try some things and you will realize like, oh, that wasn't the right term that I wanted to use. It's not giving me back the information that I wanted. There will probably be points of frustration. That means you are doing it right. Okay, so lean into the frustration for this week. Really, this entire semester is built for you to try things out, try to break the systems. So that way, again, you're really strengthening that research muscle. So when it comes time to those theses, dissertations, overall research opportunities, you will feel really strong and confident in your ability to find the information that you want, know that it's good information, analyze it, and apply it to whatever it is that you are doing. So how do we even get this process started? Well, first we need to know our general search topic. So you can check that off because you have your pop topic. But if you are doing research, whether it's for work, another degree, just out of interest, you have to have somewhere to start, and that is your topic. Once you have your topic, we're then going to start to narrow down our search terms. I do encourage that through this process, you keep a running log, whether that is in a notes file on your phone, a Word document, Google Drive, because you'll start to realize if you are going to be, maybe your niche is going to be music education, right? And you are going to be the #1 researcher on how percussionists perform better in math. If that's going to be your research area, you are going to start utilizing very similar key terms that are relevant to that content area. And you want to start to say, like, okay, this is a search that I use often and I typically return this type of information. Or vice versa, if you've been using the same keywords and it's not giving you that information, you have that on your list and you can say, like, you know what, I'm going to switch it up today, going to try something different. You'll also find that keeping a running log of your search terms will also help you in your writing because it'll help you know, like, what are those key words, what are the hot topic phrases that I want to also reference in my writing to show that I'm knowledgeable about what is the hot topic in my field. Once you have those key search terms and you have that running log, we'll also talk about being able to save searches. You can come back to them when I kind of show you a few things. But then you're going to go to those online databases. Today we're going to talk about both Google Scholar as well as Galileo. But just know there are lots of databases that you can utilize if you are a part of a particular professional organization that has their own journal. They might have databases that you can also utilize. So there's not any database that is off limits. Just know many of the databases work pretty similarly, but you also want to spend some time playing around with them and just making sure that you are comfortable with said database. Once you get into that database, you are going to go through the process of trial and error, using those search terms, finding information, weeding out that gray literature, things that are outdated, the things that aren't relevant. So you remember in our previous module, we talked about what makes good literature. How do you know that it's literature that you want to rely on? If you're still feeling a little foggy on what's considered good literature, go back to the previous module and review, but you're going to go through that process of weeding out things. While you're doing this, do know that it's not like a once and done. You're not going to be able to sit down for 5 minutes and just find everything and say, great, got it all. This is more of an adventure. This is a part of the marathon of research. So allow yourself to not get so narrowed in right off the bat. You might say maybe your pop topic is around parental involvement, and maybe you thought you were going to be really focused in on immediate family, so whether that are the parents who are in the home, but maybe through your research you're realizing that it's important to expand outside of that nuclear family and look at grandparents, siblings, aunts and uncles, family friends. The research that is talking about the importance of community in aspects of student performance, right? So you might find your way down a few rabbit holes, but don't allow yourself to get too caught up in those rabbit holes. You do need to work your way back. And I kind of say that idea of like not missing the forest for the trees. One thing that you might do is kind of set a timer for yourself, give yourself an hour. Whatever you find in that hour is what you're going to work with, because keep in mind, once you find research, you do still have to go through all of it and talk about deciphering towards the end. While you're on this adventure, this is where that running list is going to come into play, because you are going to find new key terms. There might be some things that you thought you were searching for retention, but really you needed to change your search to attrition. Or you thought you were going to be searching for 4th grade in very particularly, but maybe you're realizing you need to expand your search to all of elementary and middle grades. Or maybe you thought you were going to be researching the impact of Montessori methods, but really you need to expand it to all types of pre-K methodologies. So as you go on this adventure, you might realize that there are going to be some aspects to your topic that you might want to tweak, and that's okay. That's a part of the adventure. There are going to be key terms that are going to be added, dropped, changed. That's all okay. This is that flexibility of the research process. One side note that I want you to also think about, this might be your first or second semester in the course. Some of you are probably saying like, I'm in over my head just a little bit. It's okay. Take this as just that opportunity to play around. Again, you got your toolbox. We are adding tools to it. You don't have to be the perfect researcher right this moment. This is like day 2 in the gym. I need you to keep coming back so you can continue to build that research muscle. For those of you who are thinking about, you know what, I'm committed. I know that I want to go on past the EDS and I want to either get the EDD or the PhD. And I know that I want to start narrowing in on these particular topics for my own research. Now is a really great time to start keeping that running log. So in the future, you have another place to come back to. The opposite of that is that you might have a topic that you think like, oh my goodness, I absolutely love this topic and this is what I'm going to study forever. And by the end of the semester working on the topic with your POP team, you might decide like, you know what, that topic is really not doing it for me. I'm over it already. That's okay too. So it's okay to not be quite married to a research topic as your interests may change, the environment around education will change. And so again, go on the adventure, go with the flow. So as we're going with the flow, one thing we're going to need to do is narrow in and narrow down that topic. So there will be numerous variables that we will come into play. And through the delimitation process, this is how we are going to start to drill down on what our topic is. This might happen throughout your search, or you might establish those delimiters beforehand. But just know there is going to be some drilling down, but there also might be some expansion of your topic. Again, if you thought you were only going to be focused on one particular grade level, but you are realizing that you might see a better return from expanding it. That's okay. You might also have groupings as a part of your delimiters. So maybe you have this idea of wanting to research parental involvement. Maybe you are going to group it by elementary, middle, high school, right? And so maybe you are grouping it by new teachers, more experienced teachers, and those who are entering retirement. So you might have different groupings. Gifted students, student athletes, right? Maybe you're looking at STEM or STEAM. So there will be some different groupings that you can also use as your delimiters. Then you have your types of research. When we're talking about our types of research, this is where we're talking about our qualitative, quantitative, our mixed methods, right? So depending on how we are looking at the topic from a qualitative perspective, we are going to get some different results versus our qualitative research. Then some other delimiters might include our location. So how students in the US are experiencing may differ from those in Australia, or it might be the same, or how are students in India or those in the north versus the west coast. So we can always use location as a delimiter also. So again, we grab our topic, we're going to start to think about keywords, but also what are those delimitations that we can use to focus, narrow down on a different topic. Once we have those delimiters, again, those search terms, these are going to be our keywords and or our phrases that are going to get us even closer to our relevant information. So I already gave you this pro tip of keeping that running log. Save your searches. You never know, maybe you are doing an assignment for this class now, and this same topic comes back around in a couple of semesters, and you're like, oh, I had this really great article. I'm trying to find it again, but I don't remember what I utilized to find it. Saving searches will allow you to quickly jump back to literature that maybe you didn't need at the time, but you might need in the future. As you are narrowing in on your search terms, there are going to be a few operators that are going to allow you to produce different results in your search. So as you are playing around in Google or Galileo, I do want you to try your keywords with different search operators. And so this might look like using the word and, not, or those quotation marks. And that is going to either, if you're using quotation marks, that's going to give you an exact match. If you are using or, it is literally going to give you the results related to both terms, but they might not be in the same article, right? Like you're just going to be getting a few different articles. If you are using the word and, it's going to give you articles that have both of those key terms in that document. I've also provided in the module a short guide that talks ad nauseum about search operators. So you can refer to that to give yourself a little bit more of a leg up as you are doing your searches. In Google, having the search operator list, I think, is key because it's going to provide you lots and lots of info. As you are performing searches, you'll notice whether it is in the abstract, towards the bottom of the abstract, you're going to see keywords. This is how you're going to build your search list. As you look at articles, look at the keywords that article builds. That is likely what is current in that particular field and the keywords that researchers are really honing in on. That's going to give you an idea of like, okay, if I want to talk about this topic, these are the keywords that I also need to have a good understanding of, and these are the keywords that are going to probably get me closer to the information that I am looking for. You can also look at your reference sections that are in an article to help build your literature. So if you have an article and you are seeing the same article cited over and over again across your articles, that is probably a piece of seminal work that you are also going to want to refer to. You know, people like to work in the same circles, and so you will probably get familiar with some researchers who you will see reference again and again. And that's okay to utilize the research list or the reference list from another work to help build your reference list and things that you might want to consider. Okay, so we are going to pop over to both Google Scholar and Galileo. You can listen to this next part, pause it, and then try. Or if you have multiple screens, welcome to kind of follow along as we go through this process. While we're in Google Scholar, we will talk through some search parameters. We'll also talk through setting alerts and saving articles. As you are trying this, I would encourage that you go ahead and set up an alert for your pop topic so you can start getting a little bit more familiar with research that's related to your pop topic. While you're doing this, do try the search parameters by looking at particular years. So we want to look for things that are less than 10 years old. try looking for the key terms. So whatever list you have made, look for those key terms, and then also start looking by different research designs. So what kind of information are you getting for qualitative research? What are you getting for quantitative? What does that mixed methodology look like? Then you're going to start to look at who else is citing this. Like, is this a really popular article that is cited by thousands of people, or has only one person cited it? And then what other related articles come up with it? So similar to Netflix, I don't know what else these days, but if you start looking up something, all of the search engines are going to say, like, oh, I saw you looked at this. You might also be interested in that. And those related articles will help build your list. And then we'll set up alerts and save some articles. So let's pop into Google first. All right, so we are going to use Google Scholar. If you don't have a Gmail account, I would encourage that you set up a Gmail account. One, your Augusta.edu account is not going to be with you forever. Once you finish the program, you'll have, I want to say, maybe a year with your Augusta account, but your Gmail account will allow you to keep that forever. And it'll allow you to use the Google Scholar functionality and save things. Right, so you can use Google Scholar without an account, but if you want to save things, having that account will make it a little bit easier for you. So with Google Scholar, let's start by just, I already have a couple of safe searches, so let's start with parental involvement in academic performance. So if we were going to search for that, we're going to type it in, we're going to get lots of results, and quite frankly, no one has time to read 2 million articles, and we have no idea how relevant any of these are, right? So with Google, we can play around with a custom range. If we only want to see things since a certain year, so maybe we are focused on pre-pandemic, right? We can do that. If we are really only wanting to do post-pandemic, we can get very specific and sort by date. We can sort by, continue to sort by relevance. If we want to, okay, let's enter a custom range. Great. So we can enter a custom range. Let's say we're only interested in 2021 through 2023.
Next to the ones from Mayor Peggy or the
We can
ones.
go ahead and do a search there. And we're starting to narrow in. If we want to do an advanced search, that's going to get us a little bit further. So this is where maybe we are wanting academic performance. And so right now we are using the exact phrase parental involvement. If we wanted to play around and say that it can have at least one of the words, we can decide if it can be anywhere in the article versus it needs to be the exact title of the article. We can play around there. This has expanded our search a little bit more and has added the or search operator. And you can see, like, just by changing that, it's changed some of the top hits that we get. But we can also ask ourselves, like, does that search make sense, right? Like, are we really looking for academic performance parental or involvement, right? So in that sense, like, yes, it's giving us maybe a few relevant things up top, but we probably don't want to use the or functionality in this particular place. We might say or achievement.
Go smoothly.
Okay, so now we've narrowed down a little bit more, so you can kind of play around and see what it is that you're getting. So let's say we find an article that's of interest to us. We can either go ahead and save that article, and it will save in our saves in your library. The other thing that we can do is, let's go back to our original search.
Read a poem. I don't think.
We can also create an alert. So if this is what we want to start to receive articles about, we can create that alert. And you can decide what email account you want to send it to. And you're just going to hit create alert. And then it will be added to your article list. If you get tired of receiving those alerts, then you just are going to cancel it, and you will no longer receive emails on those topics. So depending on the topic and how you have that set up, you might get alerts every day if somebody is churning out those articles. Maybe it's once a week, but that's the quickest way to set up alerts in Google Scholar. If you pop over to Galileo, pretty similar. With Galileo, you will access Galileo from the Augusta Libraries page. Once you are on Galileo, it's going to ask if you want to sign in and if you want to set up a personalized experience. I do recommend setting up that personalized experience. Basically, that means you're making an account. It's attached to your AU account. So as we start to do these searches and you want to save things, it will save a lot easier for you, and you can go back and find that information. So with Galileo, you can do very much the same. You can do a regular search, or you can do an advanced search. Through that advanced search option, this is where you will start to see those Boolean terms, search operator, same thing. So if we are searching for, I think in maybe our first video, we did teacher attrition or teacher retention. So let's start with attrition. We can do full text and peer review. Full text, I do encourage checking off simply because it will allow you to not have to do a lot of searching for access to the article. So clicking on that full text will be beneficial. We already talked about why peer review
Can we
is so
just
important.
share
Always check out peer review. Again, there may be some times where those white papers, the textbooks, etc., are going to be important. But as a research practitioner, you are going to need a bulk of peer-reviewed literature for your assignments moving forward. You can, again, play around with publication dates. For the sake of this class, I would encourage that you are clicking on the past 10 years. But as you expand your research portfolio, there are going to be times where you are going to need the research that really started everything, right? So you might be referring to articles from the 1980s if you were trying to do a comparison of then and now, right? So there is going to be a time and place for what that publication timeline is in the custom range that you may or may not want to use, but you can play around with your publication dates. And then you can also, if you're looking at a particular journal, if you are looking for something print, you can play around with all of this information here. We want to, again, search across all of the fields versus just the abstract or just the title, or if you're looking for a particular author, all of that can be there. If you're wanting to, again, exclude topics, this is where you can say, like, no, I really only want to know about nutrition. I do not want to see anything about retention. This is where you can exclude some of those pieces. So you can set up that search.
Are you coming home?
And it's going to return lots of information for us. And this is where this article is
Okay,
already
well, we're
saved by
getting
me
something to eat. Do
earlier.
you need
So if you're
something to
wanting
eat, or
to
are you
save
getting
something, you're just
something?
going to click the ribbon.
Where y'all going?
And what will end up happening, you'll have a
Ordering
saved
from
area
Longhorn.
here that will pop up everything
Ordering
for you.
from Longhorns?
Yeah.
Then as you start to look at
Alright, that
wanting
sounds
to
pretty good.
expand your keywords, your groupings, this is
well,
where having this
I'll
idea
look
of
at the
words that
menu.
are bolded are going to relate
Yep.
back to the key terms
Let
that
me
you
finish
search.
this whole. It's
Your
gonna be like
subjects
5
are
minutes.
going to be a good idea of
Right.
maybe potential groupings that you can utilize or who is going to be talked about in that particular article. And again, that will give
I
you some
can't hear
ideas
you.
of how you can expand your search. One nice thing about Galileo when you're looking at particular searches,
Huh?
you can see your search history. So again, if you want to save your searches, you
Huh?
can do that and it will tell you exactly what it was that you did with your search, right? Those saved articles are going to pop up there also. So again, play around with Google Scholar as well as Galileo over this next module, utilizing your pop topic to see what all you're finding. We're going to jump back in. With Galileo, again, all of the search functions, they work pretty similar across all of the platforms, but do set some limitations for the years, peer-reviewed, looking for journals, and then the discipline that you are wanting to look across. Play around with those Boolean searches as well as kind of playing around with the search terms that you are using. As you are looking at your information, do remember about the who and what you are wanting to trust. There are going to be thousands of research articles that are coming up, so you are going to need to quickly decide what you are keeping and what you are tossing out. So as you are looking at things, we're looking at that shelf life. Is it current? So we are looking for things that have a 10-year or less shelf life. We also want to know, is it popular? Who else and how many people are citing that piece of work? Peer-reviewed, a must, key. Are these referee journals? They hold lots more weight, particularly in our field of education. We are avoiding that gray literature. So there is, again, that time and place where having a technical paper or maybe you looked at a conference presentation from somebody, that might inform your work, but your entire research can't be based off of gray literature. You also want to know if there's any influential or seminal work that really laid the groundwork or the foundation for this topic. That might be more than 10 years old, and that's okay, right? But the key is being open-minded to the process. Remember, it's a marathon. It's a journey that you're going on. Things that maybe you had a first look at, you might have said, like, this doesn't have anything to do with my topic, and maybe you dismissed it, but be willing to have a second look at some things, as it might be that missing link to making some things in your topic click together or expanding your understanding of your topic. So we are going to... Okay, a couple more, and then we're gonna take a little break and go to our second section. So remember, the research process is an iterative process. You're going to go on that adventure, but give yourself a time limit. Do follow your interests. I know you're working in groups this semester, and so maybe the topic isn't what you're most interested in, but as you are starting to do some work on your own, research what you're most interested in. That's going to make the process more fun, and you are going to be more likely to stick with it if it's something that you're interested in. But don't get so attached to where you're not willing to change those search terms up or go on maybe a little bit of a detour if you need to. Change up those search terms, add to your search list based off of keywords that you are finding, try different databases and see who other people are citing. You're going to do that over and over again until you get a healthy list to build your reference. And that is the process that you are going to use as you start needing to write literature reviews. That is how you find the research that supports your literature review. As you saw in our practice, sometimes you are going to get hundreds of thousands of hits, and that, quite frankly, is sometimes the most daunting part. It's exciting at first, but then it becomes exhausting because you're like, oh my goodness, I just cannot read another article. This is where you need to be able to quickly read through, look at the abstracts, look at the headers, and quickly get through that information to find the meat and the potatoes around this article. So reading the abstract, if you can read the abstract and you can check off, like, okay, this hits these key 3 things that are important to me, that's going to let me know I should look a little bit deeper. Okay, so now I've tried to find the purpose statement and the research questions. If those research questions are still checking all my boxes, then I'm going to keep going. I'm going to get a little bit deeper. I might look at the headers, or maybe I'm really just interested in the process that they did. I might only look at the methodology section. Maybe I'm trying to understand where the field is going next. I might only look at next steps and implications. So depending on how the article is looking from the abstract, I might read that abstract and say, nope, this is not what I'm looking for, move on, right? So there are probably going to be very few articles that you are truly going to read from page 1 to page 100, depending on how long the article is, but being a good researcher means that you are good at deciphering and utilizing your time wisely to get the information that you need to make the connections and make a strong argument around your research. So as you are reading through those purpose statements and the research questions and understanding what implications and limitations the article has, that then might tell you, okay, let me jump back to this other article, or let me jump back to this other key term that got me some other information, and that is how you're going to start putting the pieces together to say, this is why we should move this idea forward, or this is why we need to do additional research in this area, based off of your ability to decipher and propose an argument or next steps around your research. So here's where we're going to pause this video, and then we'll come back for the second part of module 3.
Because as you can see, I've had a lot of them made over the years. This is something I do every year with my homeroom kiddos, and I think they're just so fun. Whenever we go on field trips, or have field day or something, we'll all wear them, and it's something fun to do with my homeroom. Basically, the students just draw a picture of themselves on an index card.
All right, we're back for the second part of module 3. For the second half, we are going to talk about what is actually in the research report. So now you have found several research reports and you are getting into the process of actually reading through them. You'll find that pretty much most research reports are set up in the exact same order, and that is done on purpose. So we're going to talk through all of the sections of introduction, literature review, methods, the findings and the results, discussion, implications, limitations, and the conclusion. One thing that you will find is that it will have all of this information, but depending on the writer, sometimes they're grouped together. So you might find an article that has the introduction and the literature grouped together. You may have methodology as its own, then you might have findings and results as its own, or you might have findings and discussion grouped together, and then you might have the implications and conclusion grouped together. So it just kind of depends, but all of this information will be in the article and in that order, but you might just find a couple that are paired together. The other is this is also the same order that a traditional dissertation follows. So when someone is saying, oh, I'm working on chapter 1 or chapter 4 or chapter 5, these are typically the sections that they are referring to, depending on both the field, the program, and the university. Some dissertations are 5-chapter dissertations, some are 7, 4. So when you start to see the shorter chapters, doesn't mean that information is missing. It just means that the chapters and the information are grouped differently. So sometimes that's a fun question to ask, just in terms of what chapter folks are working on, what information they are including in that particular chapter. So let's dive into the research report. In your introduction, that is going to be the foundation of your research. That is really going to ground me, the reader, you, the reader, in what I can anticipate getting myself into as I am reading this research report. So this is going to talk a little bit about the why. It's going to have the problem statement. So a good problem statement is going to support the problem. So the literature is going to help support what that problem is. But the introduction is it's not going to go deep into the literature, but it's alluding that, hey, there is some literature to come that supports that this actually is a problem. It's not just something that I'm seeing. Other folks are citing it, and it's telling me who else is also agreeing that there is a problem at hand. It is going to tell me purpose for the study. So why is the study even happening? What might the response to the problem be? So the introduction is also going to kind of foreshadow what I should also be getting by the time we get to the conclusion, right? And it's going to point to what are the gaps in the research. So why is there even a need for this study to begin with? And then it's going to tell us the who, what, when, where, why. Again, it's going to lay the foundation of, it's going to give me kind of a roadmap of what I can expect to read. There are going to be somewhere between 2 to 3 guiding questions. And those are the questions that the researcher is attempting to answer through their research process. And those are going to be what you can expect an answer to, or some ideas around by the time they get to that discussion part of their research. As you are starting to get in the process of thinking about what your research topics might be and what your guiding questions are, 2 to 3 is enough, but you want to be really clear around what your questions that are guiding your research are. And so as you start to get into your research courses, you will get practice on clarifying and narrowing down research questions. But as you're reading through the articles currently, I want you to get some practice at identifying those research questions and really narrowing in on what's a good one from your perspective, and seeing how they approach that idea of clarity around their research question. Then in the introduction, you'll also tend to see information around a theoretical lens. So this is kind of the scaffolding in terms of how they are approaching the topic. Depending on the research design, it may or may not have a theoretical lens, or might have a theoretical framework. Again, it's the framework or the scaffolding, I like to say, around how they are approaching the topic. In your literature review, this is where they are going to be recapping what has already been discussed in this field and what's missing. So this is where they have gotten, similar how you were practicing looking for research, whoever did the study, they also looked up tons of research, and they have looked at it from maybe different groupings, different locations, different key terms, and they are really going to give a pretty clear picture of what else is being said. Is there any historical context around this topic? Is this looked at one way in the U.S., but maybe differently in Eastern culture? Is there an overarching framework? So are we using critical race theory? What is our framework that is coloring how we are looking at the problem at hand? When you are writing or reading through a literature review, you will see that it follows a pretty organized structure. So you are trying to let your argument guide your writing. So if you are trying to make an argument that first year teachers need additional in-service learning, we're going to maybe start with what does it mean to be a first year teacher? Then we might start with what is service learning, or sorry, what does in-service learning mean? And then we might give some information on what studies are saying currently on teachers who have in-service learning versus those who don't, right? So we are going to really paint a picture for somebody who has absolutely no idea about the field of education, but through that literature review, you using that organized structure is going to give them just enough information to understand the basics of the field that you are referring to. In a literature review, you are mostly going to find empirical research to support that argument, and we are also going to identify the gaps in the research. So this is what is telling us why this research is even necessary. There may be some topics that are maybe overly saturated, and that's when there might not be any more gaps in the literature at that point, because maybe through enough research, the issue has been solved, or it's not as prevalent anymore. Maybe we're seeing the tide turn in a different direction, and so now this other topic is important. Your literature review is also going to be written in an essay format, so it is going to have a synthesis of not only the one article that you're talking about, but how all of the articles that you have found work together, right? So what are all of these pieces of work saying about this particular phenomenon? You will also have opportunities where you are either going to be writing or reading an annotated bibliography. Do not get the two confused, as they are very different. As your annotated bib is going to give you an article, a synopsis, article, synopsis, article, synopsis. It's not going to give you the summary and linkages across the articles, and it's not going to really tell a story. That's what your literature review is for. Your annotated bib is a great starting place to help write the literature review. Okay. After your literature review, you're going to get into the methods or the methodology. The methodology is really like your cookbook for how the research happens. It's the recipe to where if you wanted to replicate whatever research process they did, you could go back and do that. So you are going to see a description of the methodology and whatever research design they selected. So was it a qualitative or quantitative process that they went through? How did they set that up? What participants were involved and what was the context? Like, were these students? Were they teachers? Were they governmental officials? What grade levels are we talking? Is it families? Were we looking at folks one time, or was this a longitudinal study? Were these people who just took a survey? So all of this will be presented through the methodology and research design, the participants in the context of how you found them. Were these people that you found randomly? Did you send out a survey to ask for participants? The other piece that you will see in the methodology is a little bit about you as the researcher. So what's your positionality, and do you have any biases that the reader should know about? So maybe you are a principal at your school and you're wanting to do some research on why teachers are leaving. Well, it's probably going to be important, one, for me as a reader to know that if you were doing research at your school, that it might have been a little bit more difficult for you to get participants because maybe staff didn't want to share as openly, or maybe you are trying to get folks from another country to participate. Well, there may be language barriers, or maybe you are really passionate about a certain topic because that is also how you identify. So we also have to acknowledge our roles and the power that we hold and how that might influence and change people's responses. And we also have to understand the biases that we hold and how that might also change our understanding of a topic and how we experience a topic, and then how we talk about that topic to others. Then we will also see detail on the data collection process. And so that's I did this, and then I did that, and then the following happened after. And then finally, the methodology, we're going to talk about how did we actually analyze the data. Was it numerical data, and so we ran some t-tests and ANOVAs, or was this qualitative data, so we did some coding of our data? Right. So one thing that you will notice, once you get into your own research and you are doing the writing, you are going to write in the future tense, right? To get your topic approved through a thesis or a dissertation, you're going to say, I am going to do this, and then I will do the following. But once you've actually wrapped up your research and you are reading someone else's, you'll notice that it has been written in past tense. So typically, as you are going through the proposal process, you're writing in the future or the present tense. After the research is completed, you'll go back and change everything to the past tense.
Can come true.
Then after you have done all the research, you then get into the findings and the results section. So this is where all of that information is going to be grouped based on the research questions that were in play. And this is where it gets reported back out in a mix of tables, figures, direct quotes. It's really just going to depend on the type of data that was collected, as well as what research questions were asked. In your findings and results, this is where you might also see information that you were anticipating, but you would also highlight some of the surprises, those outliers that you were not anticipating, as that's sometimes where the more exciting information is, and that is going to allow you to maybe also point to some gaps or opportunities for the future. The things that you were expecting and both the outliers, those are your opportunities for quotes, highlighting and showcasing that information through the actual numbers, the data, and the tables. So the figures and the tables that you see, you will always typically see some sentence, paragraph or two that follows that's going to further elaborate on what that table or figure is. So you're never going to have a quote or a table or figure that's just there. We need a little bit of context around what it means, and you'll see that as you are reading through research reports. Then you'll get into your discussion. So I've presented all of the numbers for you. I've given a little bit of a dialogue, but the discussion is where we're really going to dive in deeper into why does all of this matter. So I've given you the numbers, but like, so what? What does this all mean? So I'm going to be able to actually explain what it is that we're seeing, and we're going to link it back to our research. Or sorry, we're going to link it back to our literature review. So in our literature review, we may have found all of the literature is saying that folks who like sunflowers are likely to be stronger writers. And then we also found the same thing in our literature and our research. So we're going to like connect the dots that things continue to hold true, that sunflowers are a great predictor of being strong at writing, right? Or we might say like the research has been saying this for the last 10 years, but in this research, in my current research, maybe I'm seeing something different. I have a prediction that maybe now is tulips that might be stronger at producing better writers. So maybe we need to start implementing tulip gardens in our classrooms, right? So why is that important? We're going to connect the dots back to our existing literature. Are our findings in line with what other researchers are saying, or are we seeing something different? This reflects back on the research questions and the framework for which the research was taking place. Then we get into the implications and the limitations. So this is where, depending on what type of article it is, if it's an article or if this is for a degree, the requirements may be a little bit different around where the implications and limitations are put. But if there is an implications and limitations section, this is where you're going to elaborate on future opportunities. So how does all of this information impact the field of study at both the micro level of maybe your school, your students, the city, the county, the state that you are living in, as well as how does this information impact society as a whole? How does it impact pipeline from high school to higher education? How does it impact the future workforce? How do literacy scores impact how we might look at future incarceration rates, right? So we are looking at the implications that this information has at various scales. But we also need to think about what were our limitations. Most of the time, we are not able to truly survey every single human on the planet. So there are barriers to most studies. You have to think about who was not involved. Maybe we thought we were going to have a really good cross-section of society, but maybe we ended up with far more women in the study and there were no men. Or maybe these were all teachers with 30 years of experience and we didn't interview any new teachers. Maybe we only researched 5 schools in Augusta, right? But we didn't consider schools out in Wyoming, or maybe the experience of schools in Nigeria or Iran. So we have to think about who wasn't involved. When we think about, again, our positionality as a researcher, this is where we also have another opportunity to be transparent about any biases that we may have had, or maybe depending on how the study was set up, if you had co-researchers, maybe was there any interference with the process? The size of the group is important. Again, we talked about the idea of large sample sizes versus a sample size of 1. Depending on the research, if it's a quantitative research, we want to have those larger sample sizes. But if we're looking at qualitative research, a smaller group might be okay. But knowing that if we're getting information back from 3 people versus 15 people, what we can take away from that is going to be a little bit different. Also understanding where the research took place and the timing of it all. If we think about what was happening during the pandemic versus this is an election year, all of those things may have an impact on the information that we are getting back. So this is where those implications and limitations are going to be important for the reader to put into context what it is that they are digesting from your research. And so as you are reading other research, do you think about what year was it published? Is this an article from Europe? Education still happens in Europe, so you can definitely use that in your research or your pop topic, but it's going to give you a different context as their school systems are set up very differently. Then you're going to get to your conclusion. So again, the conclusion is going to continue that essay format. The entire research report is an essay. So maybe you haven't had to do any writing in a while. This, again, is a process that you will start. This semester, you're really focused on how do you just find the research. But as you're reading through different research reports, do pay attention to the styling that they use in their writing and know that once you get to the conclusion, the same way that you gave a nice foreshadowing, a nice map of where the conversation is going, in your conclusion, you want to give a nice wrap up of where we've been. So you're going to summarize a little bit of what were the key pieces of research that informed your study, what were the highlights of your methodology, the discussions, the findings. You're going to wrap everything up and put a nice bow on it. So if I were to read just your introduction and your conclusion, I would have a really pretty solid understanding of what happened in the middle. If you are trying to figure out how do I decipher through articles quickly, reading the abstract and the conclusion, those are going to give you a really good overview if you need to dive deeper into that article. The conclusion is, again, where you're going to reconnect all the dots, making sure that the reader remembers what were those key research questions in the framework, and did we get to the initial thought outcome, or was the outcome very different? And then what's next? So if you think about the why, so what, now what? This is a really good way to kind of think about where the conclusion should end, what should be next in the future of the research. And that might be future research that you then decide to do, or maybe someone else takes up that mantle and continues on the research, or maybe this now becomes a new practice that educators everywhere are implementing into their classrooms. So that is a very fast rundown of what you can expect to see in most of the research that you will be finding and reading through. So again, through Module 3, you're really focused on understanding how to find literature, and you're going to spend some time practicing finding the literature. Once you find the literature, you're going to work on really deciphering what you're reading and being able to identify the different parts of the research study. Once you're feeling really confident about identifying those different parts of a research study, do spend the rest of the module playing around with finding articles that relate back to your pop topic. There is a short video about the literature matrix assignment that you can be working ahead on over the next 3 modules to make sure that you are on track to get it completed by midterms. So have a great next 2 weeks. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and I'll see you soon.